the role of Saint Helena, who was the mother of Constantine. And correct me if I'm wrong, but she was Christian before him, right? So the mom had
It's
converted before the son.
I double checked this. It is debated. So there are some narratives where she
Hmm.
converted before and may have exposed him to Christianity, prayed for him. There are other accounts. I know Eusebius writes in early church history, and in his version, Constantine converts first. So it's not clear, but there are definitely traditions in which she was the person who came first, and that's very
But
common throughout
everyone
Christian
agrees there was
history.
a sort of, yeah, but everyone agrees there was definitely a mother-son dynamic to it.
Yes, yes, for sure. And she was
Okay.
definitely a very enthusiastic Christian.
Right, right, very devout. No, and coming from a mother who is also a very devout and enthusiastic Christian, Catholic Christian, is I could certainly relate to Constantine when it comes to that. So, one of the big things that Saint Helena is known for, though, is she's the one who and embarks in. So this is a couple of decades later, and she's still around after the Edict of Milan. About I guess about 10 years after that, she conducts this first pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and she kind of becomes the first pilgrim to the Holy Land. So she goes to Jerusalem, and she's looking for the holy sites and saying, look, I'm a Christian now. I really believe this stuff. And, travel was expensive back then, but, when your son's the emperor, it's not so bad. And so she goes in and says, look, I want to find these relics, like where was the site of the crucifixion? Where was Jesus's tomb? And of course, one of the big ones that she's associated with is the finding of the true cross. And of course, this one is hotly debated. And I'll just tell the quick story, though, is that one of the traditions that we have regarding the true cross that was supposedly found by St. Helena was that a terminally ill woman was brought before the site of the true cross, and each cross was touched to her, but only when the third cross was applied that it led to an immediate healing. And that was how she was able to identify it as the cross. And then, of course, it also had the title above it, the INRI, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And she then has them sent to Constantinople. She has this sent around, and then thus begins the building of the Church of Holy Sepulchre and many of the other pilgrimage sites. And to be fair, there had been pilgrimages before, and she certainly wasn't the first one. But the fact that the emperor's mother was going to these places certainly brought with it an amount of prestige and an amount of wealth that just sort of your average, peasant pilgrim wouldn't necessarily bring, and a lot of renown. And it really kind of started this overall process of Europeans conducting pilgrimages to the Holy Land.
Exactly. And this was a huge part of the Christian experience, especially in this period. I mean, we obviously still have pilgrimage today, but it was enormously popular in a time where it was very difficult to be a pilgrim. We have evidence that, even in the Middle Ages, you'd have bishops and they would organize these giant, multiple thousands of people would go on a big pilgrimage journey to the Holy Land. And then you had more local pilgrimages, famously the Canterbury Tales, one of the foundational works of English literature. It's about pilgrims going to Canterbury, so the chief church in the English church at the time. And you have, there's famously a pilgrimage site at, what's the name of it? It's in northwestern Spain. It's like the route of St. James, and they would go to a shrine there. And of course, Rome has always been a popular site for pilgrims. And so there's a strong tradition of piety expressing itself through actions, and that's been from the earliest day, or from the earliest days of Christianity as a big public religion. That's been a part of it, and we owe that to a Roman emperor's mother.
Well, now, one of the pieces, though, going back to this, is that it's not just Golgotha, so the spot where this had gone on. However, listen to this. According to tradition, upon arriving in Jerusalem, St. Helena aimed to find the site of Jesus' crucifixion, which was then buried under a temple of Venus, which had been erected by Emperor Hadrian to suppress Christian veneration at the site. And so this is, Christians had been going here and pilgrims for a long time since the crucifixion because they knew this was the site, and yet a pagan temple had been built on top of the site. St. Helena, of course, orders that to be destroyed, and then the site converted into a church. But this really speaks to how there was a huge process of the conversion from, and of course, as the title of your book is, this process of conversion of the pagans into Christianity. This was not, and the pagan pantheon of people, I think, know the Roman gods and the Greek gods, and there were, and the Norse gods, but there were so many others, and even lesser gods, and there were religions all over the place, and everyone was competing to be like the top religion at the time, which was a huge thing, and not really in a sense that we have today in society where, sure, you can go on Google and look up a bunch of different churches in your area, but you don't really have this competition like we did back then, and these claims of primacy and claims that we are the one true religion. So how is it that Christianity in that context is able to really come out on top? I mean, certainly if the emperor converts, that's not just going to be enough to get people who are true believers to say, all right, never mind, forget about Venus and Jupiter and Zeus and all that nonsense and Thor, and no, we're going to go with this guy from where? Oh yeah, Israel and Jerusalem and these places that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, it's another, I think, I'd say it's a myth of early Christianity, is the claim that, or you'll have critics who will say, Christianity is just another religion. It could have been anything. You'll run into this. You'd see this in the online hot takes about why Christianity is bad. They'll say, for example, Mithraism is basically the same religion, they'll say, and that could have been picked instead, or there's other faiths. And that's really not the case. If you read into the details, you definitely find we have a handful of critics of Christianity whose writings have survived, and what they'll say. For example, the Emperor Julian the Apostate. He was the last Roman emperor to be a pagan, and he wrote these attacks on Christianity. And one of the things he says in these attacks is, it's a big problem how those Christians are actually so much better at following through on their moral claims, and they're really good. One of the things he says is the Christians are great at universally loving people. So we have accounts from people who aren't Christians where they say, when a plague hits a city, the pagans will treat the pagans and the Christians will treat everybody. They will treat everyone basically equally in that regard. And we have accounts where in the ancient pagan world, the pagans it was common to expose infants, for example, if they weren't wanted or if they were disabled. And they say the Christians don't do this. The Christians, they care for every life.
Like, you're not talking about child sacrifice, are you? And child killing?
Ooh,
because certainly there were no pagans that would ever
sacrifice.
participate in that.
Yeah, child sacrifice, but also treating lives as not holding value. And that was a big innovation of Christianity.